This is Don McLeod. I'm here with Mayor Patrick Brown of Brampton. Mr. Mayor, thank you for joining us. It's been quite a difference from a year ago in Brampton, especially for yourself. I know you have been out and about in the community on a regular basis. Sometimes you go to 7, 8, 9, 10 events a day. Since COVID-19, tell us a little bit about what your day consists of, because obviously you're not out there socializing at this point. So what does a day in the life of Mayor Patrick Brown during COVID-19 look like?
Well, it is very different. You know, I'm used to being at City Hall nonstop and having a gazillion events every weekend. Right now, by and large, I'm at home, although I do go to City Hall occasionally. It's a closed facility, and I go to our Emergency Operations Center on Glidden Road. But we're all working through digital means. I have to say, you know, I had a regional council meeting, and I had my son Theodore on my lap during the regional council meeting. So there is some, I guess, silver linings of this pandemic, is that you get to spend a lot of time with the people that you love, and I get to spend a lot of time with Genevieve and Theodore. At the same time, I'm used to seeing my extended family, and I don't get to see my extended family right now because of the physical distancing. But I have to say, the fact that everyone in Brampton continues to step up and help out through the means and the ways that we can continues to be inspiring.
Now, your wife, I think she was a nurse before, so I think you're in good hands with her, right?
She wasn't a nurse, but she worked at Sick Kids Foundation. She was on the fundraising side for that national hospital. But I think she's more pleased that she has me at home to share in the diaper changing duties, the bath duties, the waking up early in the morning with Theodore. And I have to tell you the truth, I'm liking it myself too. You know, at 9 months, it's a pretty special time.
Perfect. Okay, so let's get right into it. I know the Federation of Mayors, you know, Canadian municipalities, they want the federal government to throw money to municipalities. Obviously, on Wednesday, when you did your COVID update on the city, you mentioned that the city itself was for $44.7 to $55 million shortfall, basically more in transit and recreational fees. But we all know that that's probably going to be a drop in the bucket when compared to, I mentioned gas tax also is going to be falling as well. But the property taxes, people have had the option to defer property taxes, where most municipalities get their majority of their money from property taxes. So how much has Brampton actively said that they need to basically have you know, keep their budget where it should be?
Well, there's two components to this question. One, we do have some national advocacy. I'm part of the Canadian Big City Mayors Caucus, and once a week, all the big city mayors have a conference call, and we go over our common priorities, and we have speakers from the federal government, usually the Deputy Prime Minister, Chrystia Freeland, or the Infrastructure Minister, Catherine McKenna, and we've all acknowledged that we're facing similar financial challenges, and that where municipalities don't have the ability to run a deficit, the federal government can, and we're going to need some financial assistance. And the areas we're losing money, we're doing for the national good. And let me give you an example, Don. In Brampton, we're maintaining our transit department. It would be easy to shut down transit, and we wouldn't have the same operating losses we're having every day. But the reality is Brampton has the largest food cluster of food processing companies in Canada. And if we stopped operating transit, then we wouldn't have the employees to work in those companies that are keeping our shopping markets busy and food in those aisles. We also have national medical laboratories that are critical right now during the pandemic. You look at Dynacare, that also depends on transit for its employees. And so there's a national good here. But the fact that municipalities continue to bleed revenue by performing essential services. You look at policing, paramedics, firefighters. These are services we have to provide regardless if there's a pandemic or not, and there's a cost to that. And so I have to say I've been encouraged by the federal response and the provincial response. They both told me that there's going to be some help coming to municipalities, that there's going to be a reconciliation of some of the financial exposure. So I'm not overly worried at this time, but we are still being careful with all expenses at City Hall, mindful that this is going to be a difficult year.
So how many people actually do you know took advantage of deferral of their property taxes?
So there was a fair number. We can get Brampton Focus the exact number, but there was a high take up in the city. And as we said, those that have the means to pay, but those that need time to get their finances in order, that we offered them that service. I thought it was generous what Brampton did. You know, Toronto was only a 2-month deferral maximum. Mississauga's 3 months, and Brampton was 5 months. And so, because we've been good fiscal guardians, we've been able to show more discretion. And I have to say that in this year's municipal budget, we made the largest investment in city reserves in our history, 110 million. And why that's significant is, and I hope we don't have to use any of that, but we put those reserves in case there's an emergency situation. And so there's some municipalities that don't have any room to move. You know, the mayor of Vancouver said they could be in a bankruptcy situation. You know, I can assure residents that as much as we have financial challenges right now because we're not charging fares for transit, and buildings like the Rose Theatre are sitting empty, and our normal recreational fees that we get for rentals we're not getting. As much as we have challenges like that, there are no concerns in Brampton about bankruptcy, and that we have relatively healthy finances.
So let's go back a little bit to the federal government and why municipalities cannot actually take on debt. Because the provincial government takes on debt, the federal government takes on debt, and municipalities are not allowed to. But at the same time, the federal and provincial governments have been downloading services to the municipalities and not supporting them on a regular basis. And then they tie their hands, and then municipalities are shackled on how they can raise any kind of funds other than property and development charges. Like, have you advocated for the federal government or the provincial government to say, you know, and maybe the FCM, are they actually talking to the government level saying, we need in this situation the ability to take on debt? I mean, we're talking about a lowest interest rate in probably 100 years. And this is an opportunity. It's not like, you know, you're not going to pay it back. It's just that it gives you a little bit of breathing room. Is that something that the FCM and yourself are advocating?
So that's not something we've been advocating for. I don't want to be in a position where the municipal governments are, you know, it's bad enough that we've got provincial and federal governments that have significant permanent cycles of deficit financing. I wouldn't want a third level of government to be in that same position. And so, no, we have not advocated to be able to run deficits. I like the fact that the Municipal Act doesn't allow that. It's like, Don, if someone offered you a credit card that could have a $50,000 limit, you may not want that. And so I like the fact that there's tighter.
It depends if I have to pay it back.
Yeah, there's.
It depends if I have to pay it back.
And you have to pay it back. And so I it's not something I've advocated for. I like the fact that we're under stricter fiscal discipline. But my point is, on areas that we have to provide services for the national good, there needs to be some support for that. And I have to tell you, the Deputy Prime Minister, federally, the Minister of Finance, provincially, have told me that there's going to be some support. And so, so far, the conversation has been very collaborative.
Okay, the other thing is the federal government did mention that when the COVID situation loosens up a bit or is lifted, they're talking about ready to give municipalities an influx of cash for shovel-ready projects. We've been hearing about shovel-ready projects in Brampton for the last 8 years. What is on top of your list that is ready to go if the federal government said tomorrow, here's X amount of millions of dollars? What project is number one on the list to get done?
So we actually have a list of billions of dollars of shovel-ready projects in Brampton. The federal government is right now saying that they want us to prepare those lists, but they're not going to start them until after the pandemic is over. And so it's not something that's happening immediately, but I do like the fact that the government is going to look at some infrastructure stimulus spending. These are great projects that can spin off construction jobs, keep local restaurants busy. And so it worked in 2009, and I welcome it again if we have an initiative like this that will likely be in 2021. In terms of projects in Brampton, whether it is our new transit facility in Brampton East, which I love to be able to upgrade to make it for electric buses. Right now, we're about to build our new transit facility, and that's a huge project. We've got a rapid bus transit on Queen Street. We've got the LRT extension. There's the Riverwalk project. We've got a number of projects that are integral to Brampton that are ready to go, that are shovel ready.
Okay, the next question in regards to basically pay cuts. I know a lot of politicians and there's a lot of people advocating for MPs and MPPs to take pay cuts. I know that the city council basically, they deferred, or they're giving their, I think it was a 1.7% increase to the salary. They were donating that to charities. Is the city considering, or you considering as a council, to pay cut even further?
So in Brampton, we didn't want any attention over it. We just did it quietly. Part of everyone that works in the city of Brampton gets a cost of living increase. And we talked about it as a council, and we decided that we would forego that and we would all donate it to charities of our choice in our respective wards. Right now, there's so many people that have lost their jobs. There's so many people that are going through economic adversity, and really that's where our focus is. I would say that we have a council that a very talented council. There's people out there that gave up successful careers to be able to be involved in public service. And I can tell you, after speaking to members of the council, I don't think any of them are motivated by remuneration. The council we have is really focused on public service.
All right. I know that the CDC out of the United States, they were talking about there's a second wave that they consider going forward. We haven't heard from Dr. Tam in regards to that, but they figured that the fall and winter is going to be a second round of this COVID situation. If this goes into obviously into January of next year, I mean, we're talking about a lot of businesses at the ground level, small businesses, some even medium-sized businesses that are going to be belly up. I know in Brampton, there's some in the downtown core that have been complaining. What are we looking at here? Is this a situation where we continue to lock down, or is there some kind of monies, or, I mean, the federal government is giving money to students, to this, to that, and everything else, but that can only go on for so long, and businesses are in that position where, they might not survive another 2 to 3 months.
So it keeps me up at night thinking about the plight of small businesses, and it's not just the health pandemic I worry about, because obviously we're very worried about the loss of life of loved ones in our community, but this is a firestorm that small businesses are going through. These are our job creators, and I'm really worried that we're going to see some that aren't going to be able to make it. I wish I could give the business community an exact date when things will be back to normal, but I can't. What I can tell you is public health advises me that the physical distancing measures are working, that we could see some of these provisions being relaxed in mid-June, maybe for the duration of the summer, and depending on whether we continue to be careful as a community, we might be able to avoid a second wave, but there's no guarantee on that. There could be a second wave. Really, we're not out of the woods until we have a vaccine, and to get a vaccine or a reliable antibody test, it's not going to be until 2021, and so we've got a tough year. But Brampton is tough. Canadians are tough, and we'll find a way to get through this collectively. And for everyone out there, the message that I have is that you're not alone. That we're all in this together, and we're all going to have to adapt. And it's years from now we're going to talk about this. People that live. I think of my grandmother. She's 105 now, and people like her who lived through the Spanish influenza talked about it as something that that was horrible, that was difficult, but they got
right,
through. And I think this is something we're going to talk about from years to come.
And that's the problem, because you're trying to governments have basically said to the public that this is a serious pandemic. You have to take it seriously. You have to do social distancing, stay in the house. They've said that for about a month now. And then you have the premier saying there's a possibility of maybe May 18th, which is the May 2-4 weekend, we might be all ready to go and open up and release restrictions. It's like, how do you put a serious spin on this and then try and de-escalate the serious spin and say everything is okay when we're hearing from the experts that there could be a second wave, and then we still have to practice social distancing? It's a fine line between what governments are telling you on one hand and then what they're telling you later to say, okay, we have to be restrictive. Because I get it. I'm sure that you're being lobbied by businesses on a regular basis saying, we need to make money, we need to get back in business, we need to generate revenue income. But at the same time, you've got safety from the citizens that, we're in a pandemic here. This is not a light situation. So the message and how it is conveyed to the public is very tricky.
And, I think the Premier probably misspoke when he said the May 2-4 weekend. I believe he corrected himself since. There are no absolute dates. It's a fluid situation, and we trust the advice of public health. Certainly in Brampton, our decisions will be governed based on the advice of health professionals on when it's safe to see some of the relaxing of these provisions. And we have a working group chaired by Councillor Medeiros that is already working on how we could have safe reopening, but it will not be triggered until public health tells us it is safe to do so. In terms of mixed messages, I would say there's two different stories to this pandemic in Ontario and frankly Canada. There is a very difficult pandemic that we are fighting in urban centers, and it's a different world in some of the small towns and rural areas. You look at my former hometown of Barrie, they have 1 or 2 cases. In Kingston, they have no cases, and so you have situations where there is no evidence of the COVID-19 pandemic in some rural parts of the country, and you've got other parts of the country, like in Brampton or in Toronto or in Durham, where we're in a full-fledged battle, where our long-term care centers are under siege, where we have continued growth of the pandemic every day. And so there is a dichotomy into where the country is. And so you hear leaders in rural Canada pushing for a reopening, and you have leaders like John Tory and others in urban parts of the and Valerie Plante in urban parts of Canada saying, we're not ready to reopen. We're still fighting for people's lives right now. And I think because of that dichotomy, there are some mixed messages.
Yeah, and the message actually, your first message about social distancing and physical distancing that you made about 2 or 3 weeks ago in regards when you were doing your very first COVID update from the City of Brampton, that video that we actually took and set out, that messaging went viral. So you've got over 2 million people that saw you give that message out in social distancing, and it even went over to the UK, where there's a city, I guess, named Brampton, and people were commenting on it as well. So you've got yourself a viral video on safety. So that's a good thing as well.
That's why you always got to make sure you've got Brampton Focus at your press conferences.
Well, thank you very much, Mayor, for this. I know you're very busy. You've got calls to different people all the time. So we'll let you go, and thank you. Hopefully we can do this again, and we'll keep in touch.
Anytime.